And Associate Professor Jamus Lim has asked if we can borrow more to fund soft capital like education. We have to refrain from the temptation to borrow for what are essentially recurrent expenditures. In many countries, there is a tendency to expand the scope of what constitutes soft capital beyond the original intentions. So when use of fund increases to government subsidies or social transfer, it is really more recurrent spending. Borrowing continuously for them will just lead to ever higher debts, which have to be repaid by future generations. When borrowing is not used productively, the result has often been high debts, low growth, rather than high growth, low debts. As debt level grows, interest payments can also increase, as Associate Professor Jamus Lim himself pointed out. This can lead to an unsustainable fiscal position and spiraling debt, affecting investor confidence, raising the costs of funding for businesses, and ultimately our long-term growth. In addition, interest rates are low, in fact, ultra low for now, but this may change quickly. When it changes, existing debts would have to be refinanced, and a higher rate could spiral the fiscal situation downward quickly. So I was very alarmed when I heard Associate Professor Jamus Lim citing theoretical literature that speculation could be stabilizing. I will also point out that there are other academics who recognize that currency markets can be marked by massive instability. It is in fact well acknowledged by most economists today that market-driven short-term flows are and will continue to be fickle and extremely volatile. The episode in 1992, when hedge fund manager George Soros took on the Bank of England by betting against the sterling pound and dramatically destroyed the UK monetary system, is one stark example. To put it simply, foreign exchange speculations have been and will continue to be a threat to economies, especially small, open ones like ours.
Let me just begin by fully agreeing with the principles that he laid out, and I believe that not myself, but also the Workers' Party agrees with the principles of prudence and stewardship. And we also agree that we, of course, do not have oil gushing out of our ground. Now, that said, I think we can potentially have ideas gushing out of our heads, and that is precisely why I made the suggestion about soft infrastructure, and I wonder why Minister Heng remains dismissive of soft capital. The key, I think, is ultimately that we invest what we end up borrowing, and while I agree that we shouldn't allow recurrent expenditures to be lumped into capital, into soft capital, it's easy to allow recurrent expenditures of all forms, like various HQ functions in hard capital projects. The key is that we always evaluate how we define a given project as soft or hard capital and its ultimate investment and repayment potential. My second point is, again, a clarification. I should be clear, I'm not suggesting a revision in our exchange rate regime. I am questioning whether there is a need to keep reserve information secret, and whether that actually helps or hinders our effort to do so. What I heard DPM Heng share was a lot of reasons why the exchange rate targeting regime is warranted for our country, and I cannot agree more. But I did not hear strong reasons why secrecy over our reserves actually helps in that case. Markets, I think we both acknowledge, can be volatile, but I think they tend toward the truth. And indeed, speculation, as I conceded, can in fact be destabilizing if our exchange rate is disconnected from the fundamentals. So what leaves me to wonder is if Minister Heng is suggesting that our current situation, such secrecy can actually help us to maintain what is an otherwise untenable rate, because I know that the ministry has routinely denied that we manipulate our exchange rate, only that we seek stability.
I did not dismiss soft capital. You said that I was dismissive of soft capital. I did not. I say I sound a word of caution about soft capital Precisely because it is soft, it can morph into various shapes. And I had mentioned how very many good schemes started with very good intentions, with very good people, but precisely because it's soft, the shape changes, and over time, everything becomes a capital investment. So that's the first point. Second, so I think there is a role for building all this soft, just as how you can build. If we want to talk about whether my notion of partnership working together is soft capital, well, you can say that and say, should we invest a lot of money in that, right? And we have been very careful to see how we can build our society. And in fact, there's a lot of, if you want to use terminology, academic terminologies like this, I mean, there's a lot of soft capital in our neighborhood because people are supporting one another. And we did see soft capital coming up, but that's not the issue. The key issue is this. We have to be very careful with recurrent spending and be outcome focused, which was a point that Mr. Pritam Singh mentioned right at the outset. Your second question on the exchange rate, let me again state, for the benefit of our currency stability and for the benefit of all these debates around the world about manipulating exchange rate, Singapore does not manipulate our exchange rate. Singapore does not manipulate our exchange rate. We do not manipulate it to secure a competitive advantage because that is not sustainable. As an economics professor, I think you'll fully understand that. The long-term sustainability for economic competitiveness must come from productivity growth and labor force growth. Our labor force growth is tending towards zero, and so we have to rely on productivity growth, which is why in the next phase of our transformation, you need to focus on technology and innovation-driven growth. So we don't manipulate exchange rate. So what do we do? What is our exchange rate policy centered on? It is not different from other central banks, which is maintained medium-term price stability, so that economic agents, economic players can make decisions on the basis that these are the relative prices that they can make decisions on, that you do not have runaway inflations. And even then, I would say that right now, because of the COVID, there are again new thinking about whether this inflation targeting is the right approach and so on. But as far as Singapore is concerned, we have been maintaining price stability, and that has allowed our economy to have the macroeconomic framework to stay competitive. So your question about our exchange rate regime, I'm glad that you are not saying that we should review our exchange rate regime. That is good. As to your question about why volatility, why the secrecy, I don't wish to hold up this whole forum. I devoted more than 2 pages of my reply to you on that, about the size of currency trading, about my experience in MAS during the global financial crisis, about my experience when I was accompanying Mr. Lee Kuan Yew to the countries which were so badly hit by the Asian financial crisis.